Chairman Holland, are you familiar with 287G programs?
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear you.
Are you familiar with 287G programs? 287G where local law enforcement works with ICE?
I'm not familiar with those programs, sir.
Okay. Well, those programs allow the state and local law enforcement to work together. They train together. So back to the question that Ms. Ortega asked, Representative Ortega asked. So is there no coordination in terms of even the training of your bill with CBP or any other federal agency?
Mr. Romero, this bill is about an 8-hour refresher course on Texas-Mexico border peace officer response. It's not about anything other than providing our local law enforcement agencies and sheriff's departments an additional tool in their toolbox to train and to help with policies and procedures as consistent with Department of Public Safety training.
Yeah, understand. But since we're talking about the Texas-Mexico border, where is it your understanding that it's only the federal government's responsibility to enforce the crossing of our border?
Yes, it is the federal government's responsibility to defend our southern borders, which affect all Texans, all 30 million Texans, regardless of where they live in the state, what county they reside. But once crime happens on our side, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are providing the tools and resources to all law enforcement to handle that in the manner in which would be consistent with.
And what type of crime would you be describing?
All crime.
So could you give me an example of what, if they're fighting crime, what type of crime do you think that our law enforcement officers are going to be trained in to combat? And the reason for that question, if you can, well, go ahead and answer that first, sir.
The answer to your question is drug trafficking, human trafficking, criminal activity, theft.
So you're talking about once we're on the Texas side, so you're talking about well into the state, or you're talking about along the Texas border?
All throughout the state. The Texas-Mexico border, it happens to be in the southern part of our state, but all crime, all encroachment on our state happens and affects even where you and I live in the North Texas area.
So this training is going to be for all law enforcement officers?
It is an optional training program for any local or sheriff's department that would like to participate in an 8-hour refresher course on border operations training so that they can be consistent with what we already teach our Department of Public Safety officers.
So you went back to border operations. So that's where I'm getting at in that question. Since it's a federal responsibility to enforce our border laws, but yet there's no coordination with the federal government, CBP, and so on, since it's currently their role along the border. So it's not your intent for them to be acting as Border Patrol officers.
No.
Is that correct? Okay. And I also asked about 287G as an example of the type of coordination that happens between the feds. One of the things that you had here, another is northbound, southbound, interstate criminal activity. In that training, is there, you specifically talked about drug trafficking, trafficking of persons. Will there be any training in trafficking of firearms?
The Department of Public Safety, in their current training practices for troopers and other law enforcement, would be helping with local agencies on identification of trafficking. It would be all criminal activity, Representative Romero.
Yeah, you specifically pointed out drug trafficking and trafficking of persons, and I think that when we talk about the cartels and them being armed, that would be something that we would consider. Do you feel that's important, that we should also, in training our officers, that we should train them in
On the first page of the bill, criminal activity occurring along the Texas-Mexico border, including drug trafficking, trafficking of persons, and other activity carried out by cartels, transnational gangs, and other groups engaged in organized criminal activity.
So how would I actually don't know the term for folks that sell guns. What if we have somebody moving guns from the U.S. into Mexico to feed those into the hands of the cartels? Is that something that we should be concerned with as well?
I think we're very concerned about that.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Holland. Appreciate
Thank you, Representative Romero. Move passage.